Welcome back to Peregrine Prude. I'm your rambling host, Colby Matthews. Well, do you remember whenever we did part one of Ross Douthat's Bad Religion? Yeah, I don't either. Anyways, today we're gonna finally do part two. It's an excellent book by Ross Douthat, Bad Religion. We're not going to be looking at the book as a unified whole. We're just going to be looking at some selected quotes and points that I find interesting that I want to share with you. But first, I thought that it would be interesting to maybe play a little short game here in the introduction. A game of two truths and a lie. So I'm going to tell you three statements. Two of them will be true. One of them will be a lie. About my experiences. In these examples, all three of them revolve around food. And so here we go. Maybe if you want to, in the comments, give your answer for which one you think is the lie. Here we go. I have eaten pufferfish soup before. I've eaten pufferfish soup before. Second statement. I've eaten fried scorpion on a stick. I've eaten fried scorpion on a stick. Third statement. I've eaten dog meat before. I've eaten dog meat before. So once again, two of them are true statements. One is not. Comment down below which one you think is not true. Alrighty. Let's dive into it. This first quote, it's like one long paragraph. I don't usually like to read passages this long, but it's so good. Bear with me here at the outset, and it's just really good. I think you'll see why I want to read this long passage. Christianity is a paradoxical religion because the Jew of Nazareth is a paradoxical character. No figure in history or fiction contains as many multitudes as the New Testament's Jesus. He's a celibate ascetic who enjoys dining with publicans and changing water into wine at weddings. He's an apocalyptic prophet one moment, a wise ethicist the next. He's a fierce critic of Jewish religious law who insists that he's actually fulfilling rather than subverting it. He preaches a reversal of every social hierarchy while deliberately avoiding explicitly political claims. He promises to set parents against children and then disallows divorce. He consorts with prostitutes while denouncing even lustful thoughts. He makes wild claims about his own relationship to God and perhaps his own divinity without displaying any of the usual signs of megalomania or madness. He can be egalitarian and hierarchical, gentle and impatient, extraordinarily charitable and extraordinarily judgmental. He sets impossible standards and then forgives the worst of sinners. He blesses the peacemakers and then promises that he's brought not peace but the sword. He's superhuman one moment, the next he's weeping. And of course, the accounts of his resurrection only heighten these paradoxes by introducing a post-crucifixion Jesus who is somehow neither a resuscitated body nor a flitting ghost, but something even stranger still, a being at once fleshly and supernatural, recognizable and transfigured, bearing the wounds of the crucifixion even as he passes easily through walls. I just love, there's so much beauty in the juxtapositions presented in this paragraph. It shows how it's not really beneficial to present certain aspects of Jesus, of God, without also presenting the other aspects. And this is kind of where a lot of churches, a lot of Christians, a lot of theologians go astray. I mean, we have all gone astray in this regard before, where maybe we focus a little bit too much on the judgmental. We try to, to be a Christian is to be an imitator of Jesus, right? It's to be obedient to God the Father, which is in part to be an imitator of Jesus Christ. Because our imitation of Jesus Christ is to be done because he was the most perfect obeyer of God the Father. And so sometimes in our imitation of Christ, we focus on certain aspects of Christ over others, and that can lead to unhealthy applications, sinful applications. If we focus too much on Jesus' judgments, well, we might lose appropriate applications of his grace and his mercy, right? If we focus too much on Christ's avoidance of upsetting the political landscape, we might ignore, perhaps whenever it's obviously the right thing to do to get politically involved, because maybe the social hierarchy needs to be changed in some way or another. Those are just a couple examples. I'm sure you could come up with better ones in your own mind. In Christian teaching, the pursuit of money can be as morally dangerous as the possession of great wealth. And the middle class striver may be as steeped in sinfulness as Andrew Carnegie or Donald Trump. Now I believe that this book came out before Trump was president, even before I think he ran for president. In the story of the camel and the needle's eye, the disciples recognized all men stand condemned, not because we are all rich, but because almost all of us desire to be so, and too often organize our lives around that desire. Right, this verse is a commentary on the notion that love of the verse that says the love of money is the root of all evil. A lot of people, they try to omit that first part, the love of, and they try to focus on, they try to claim that money is the root of all evil. That is not the case, right? Any material object is neither evil nor righteous in and of itself. It's only whenever the human heart enters the equation and desires for whatever physical material we're talking about come into play, and the application of those materials come into play, that is where evil and righteousness dwell. If we had this world, if this world, Earth, existed without without humanity, then there would be no righteousness or evil. I would say that. I guess you still have the spiritual beings, right? I don't know. It makes you wonder. This kind of gets along. This kind of touches when did Satan rebel? When did certain like the satanic angels? When did they fall? Was that before creation? After creation? Maybe somewhere during creation? I don't know. But anyways, as far my point is that if there were no humans in reality, in physical reality, then there would be no righteousness or evil. Because in a rock, there's no spiritually good or evil. In in a dog, there's no capacity for righteousness or evil. There is the sense that all of creation is good because God pronounced all creation as good after He created it. However, now there's that fallen aspect to all of creation. But I would say it all still has the capacity for to be good. But as far as like righteousness and evil, humans are what bring that into the equation, insofar as we obey or disobey God with the materials that are around us. I think he makes a good point here also, in his main point. One of his main points here is that you don't have to be a greedy miser. You don't have to be a Scrooge and have committed all kinds of evils to gotten your money or to maintain your money. You can be poor and still be very much guilty of greed, because as he said, perhaps you've organized your life around the pursuit of money, and just because you haven't been successful at it doesn't mean that your heart isn't in that bad place. And money is a tool, just like a hammer, just like a screwdriver, just like anything. Money is a mere tool. Now, I don't think it's necessarily wrong to have a lot of money, have a lot of tools in your toolbox, to have a lot of money in the bank. That is not wrong. Being rich is not wrong. But if being rich is the organizing, and staying rich is the organizing principle that your life operates on, that is loving money, and that is the root of all evil. And I even wonder, sometimes like money, the Bible says money is the root of all evil. And I often wonder, is it really the love of money that it is, or is it the love of the power and the influence that money can bring you? I think within the Bible there's even maybe an implied deeper meaning behind the love of money. I mean, what's the point in having money if it doesn't get you anything else? At least security. I mean, it's going to give you security, right? I mean, at least perceived security on some human level. And that security on some human level that money can bring you, that sense, that peace of mind, that is in a sense, I would say, a form of power. Unfortunately, like a lot of people, when they get a lot of money, they have a vulgar term for people that have this like a ghastly amount of money, and they call that, I won't say the bad word, they call that FU money. All right, it's FU money. It's like you have so much money that you don't have to care what anybody else thinks, because you're so secure. You don't have to work. You don't have to You don't have to, like, basically you are totally the ruler of your own life because you're so rich. And you can say F you to anybody because you have so much money. That is also, that's what that quote is talking about. Like many forms of liberal Christianity, the marriage of God and mammon half expects somehow to undo the fall through the beneficence of providence and the magic of free market. In its emphasis on the virtues of prosperity, it risks losing something essential to Christianity, skipping on to Easter, you might say, without lingering at the foot of the cross. It's there that you find the pieces of Christian tradition that a gospel of prosperity leaves by the wayside. And understanding that there can be strength in weakness and defeat, and appreciation for the idea that there might be greater virtue in poverty and renunciation, suffering and purgation than there is in abundance and delight. A hard-earned wisdom about the seductions and corruptions associated with worldliness, power, and wealth. Shorn of these aspects of the faith, Christianity risks becoming an appendage to Americanism, a useful metaphysical thread for a capital society's social fabric, but a faith that's bound, perhaps fatally, to the rise and fall of the gross domestic product. Wow, what an indictment this passage is, especially for proponents of the prosperity gospel. Right, I'll read this part right here is especially powerful. Right, the prosperity gospel, it doesn't have a proper appreciation or understanding that there can be strength and weakness and defeat, like, or an appreciation for the idea that there may be greater virtue in poverty and renunciation, suffering and purgation, than there is in abundance and delight. Right? God raises some people up to be rich, but if he does it for his glory and for his kingdom. God, I'm still going to use the word raises some up. God raises some up to be poor. And when he does so, he does it for his glory and for his kingdom. God raises some up to be petite bourgeoisie. That's French for lower middle class. That's me. That is very likely you. And if God raises us up to be petite bourgeoisie, then he does so for his glory and for his kingdom. Now, does that necessarily mean that let's say you're poor, that God can't change your financial or social status? No. Obviously, I mean, if you're poor at one moment and you're content in your service to God in your poverty, but then all of a sudden there's an obvious blessing that comes your way, and it changes your financial condition, and now you're rich. Does it mean that you should not receive, that you should deny that blessing coming to you whenever it's like an obvious blessing of God? No. It doesn't mean you need to necessarily stay in whatever socioeconomic condition you're in. There's nothing wrong. Like at my work, I received a promotion about a month and a half ago. I mean, it increased my income. It increased my responsibility at work. Should I have not taken that? No. Did it change my socioeconomic bracket necessarily? I wouldn't say so. I'm thankful for it, and it was an obvious blessing from God. So like don't say no to blessings whenever they're obvious. There's nothing wrong with working hard and trying to get a promotion. That's not what this is saying. This is saying that if that's the organizing principle, if that is like if that desire usurps or is higher than your desire to glorify God and increase His kingdom, well, then that's something to be concerned about. Okay. In the margins here, I have a comment. It says, "The danger of unity for unity's sake." Here's the paragraph. When the conditions of society are becoming more equal and each individual man becomes more like all the rest, a habit grows up of ceasing to notice the citizens and considering only the people, of overlooking individuals to think only of their kind. This is kind of the idea of like, you ignoring the trees for the forest. At such times, the human mind seeks to embrace a multitude of different objects at once, and it constantly strives to connect a variety of consequences with a single cause. The idea of unity so possesses man and is sought by him so generally that if he thinks he has found it, he readily yields himself to repose in that belief. No, not content with the discovery that there is nothing in the world but a creation and a creator, he is still embarrassed by this private division of things and seeks to expand and simplify his conception by including God and the universe in one great whole. Right, right. I think we kind of see this in Marxism and socialism. They grasp on to a certain universal explanation of why things are the way they are. And even though that explanation may be useful in explaining things in part, they unfortunately latch on to this ideology, this explanation of things, and they wrongly apply it too holistically. We see this with critical race theory. Right, critical race theory, it has some, it makes a few good points. It makes some good points, but it goes wrong when it applies it so holistically as an explanation for like so many ills in society. The ills in society are due to so many more things than just what critical race theory espouses. Critical race theory is very it's a too simplistic explanation for what it proposes to explain. It's much more dynamic than that, and then of course that's why they brought in what is it? Intersectionality, the internet intersectionality theory, and so they try to bring all these aspects of critical theory in under one umbrella of intersectionality, but that even though they're bringing more aspects of critical theory besides just critical race theory into it, it still is very short-sighted and not expansive enough. You got to have the spiritual aspect, because that is the driving force of all societal ills. And if you're just trying to explain things on a secular level without bringing the spiritual into it, you're not even scratching the surface. You're trying to scratch the surface off, but you're not even getting the surface off. Fresca! Pretty good. All right. Most religious teenagers either do not really comprehend what their own religious traditions say, or they are supposed to believe. My cadence was off with that. Let me start over. Most religious teenagers either do not really comprehend what their own religious traditions say they are supposed to believe, or they do not understand it and simply do not care to believe it. What they believe instead is remarkably consistent across different denominations and traditions. According to Smith and Denton, the de facto creed of America's youth has 5 main premises. 1. A God exists who created and ordered the world and watches over human life on earth. 2. God wants people to be good, nice, and fair to each other, as taught in the Bible and by most world religions. That's kind of going off the deep end there. 3. The central goal of life is to be happy and to feel good about oneself. They dove straight off the deep end. God does not need to be particularly involved in one's life, except when God is needed to resolve a problem. They're almost to the bottom of the canyon. 5. Good people go to heaven when they die. Yep. Now there's a context here. I don't know why he just picked on religious teenagers in this. I'm not going to go into the full context, but I think this could be applied to just people across the board, right? So-called religious people. People who are spiritual. People who I would say, from an older term, they're deists. They believe there is a God, but they don't own up to any personal God, to any specific God, to any self-revealed God, as in the Bible. They just like the idea of God as a comfort and as an insurance policy. And the Smith and Denton, the people who kind of in the book came up with these 5 points, they label this quite interestingly, this religiousness, this religiosity, as moralistic therapeutic deism. That sounds exactly what it is. It's deism, like what I said before. It's like therapy. It's self-therapy. Makes them feel good about themselves, comforts them. It's basically people who they perhaps practice as if they're atheists. They live their lives as if they're atheists, but they're not ready to fully accept or take in where the logic of where atheism would eventually go, where that would really eventually take them in their hearts and minds. What I got going? Okay, here we go. Okay, but a tolerant society is not necessarily a just one. Men may smile at their neighbors without loving them, and decline to judge their fellow citizens' beliefs out of a broader indifference to their fate. An ego that's never wounded, never trammeled or traduced, and that's taught to regard its deepest impulses as the promptings of the divine spirit can easily turn out to be an ego that never learns sympathy, compassion, or real wisdom. And when contentment becomes an end unto itself, the way that human contents express themselves can look an awful lot like vanity and decadence. Ain't that right? Look right. I want to reread this part right here. Men may smile at their neighbors without loving them. I do that, right? I do that a lot, unfortunately. And decline to judge their fellow citizens' beliefs out of a broader indifference to their fate. Right? Think about this. As Christians, we have God's word revealed to us. God's self-revealed word given to us in the Bible, corroborated via the Holy Spirit who indwells us. If we know a certain behavior displeases God, and we see a fellow Christian engaging in that behavior without contrition, without any moral compunction at all, and if we don't say anything to them, we are displaying a broad indifference to their fate. Right? We are displaying vanity and decadence within ourselves, because instead of having that uncomfortable conversation with that person out of love and gently trying to guide them back to obedience, we are being vain because we want to preserve people liking us more than we want to have that difficult conversation out of love with that person. Now because that person very well may receive our nosiness, our sticking our nose where it doesn't belong from their perspective, they may perceive it as hateful or as judgmental, perhaps at the very least. Are we being judgmental? Yeah. Yeah, we are. That is being judgmental. Is being judgmental wrong in that situation? No, it's not, because we are judging. It's not us judging. We are expressing God's judgment. We are just revealing what God has already said. So it's not us judging necessarily. It's us just reminding or revealing that person of God's judgment, hopefully for that person's benefit. And then it's up to that person to decide how he or she receives it. That's kind of the idea behind the 3 steps of church discipline. And I think I applied it in that scenario to Christian to Christian. But I also think that there's definitely an application from Christian to the non-Christian world as well. The problem is, as I've said many times before, is that it's for a non-Christian, you have to believe in the bad news before the good news, the gospel, is even relevant. And that's where our culture is going. There is no more belief in the bad news. First of all, there's the belief in God, in any kind of God, let alone the only true God of the Bible, is disappearing. And then beyond that, even if you do nominally believe in a generic God, or even the God of the Bible, but just in a nominal sense, that a lot of people don't embrace that bad news. The fact that we are utterly separated from God. We are dead in our trespasses against God. We are dead. Every single one of us is dead. We have no chance of salvation. We have no chance of relationship with God. And it's only through Jesus Christ, His death, burial, and resurrection, His propitiation through us, that God the Father sees us through the veil of Christ's righteousness. We are righteous via Christ's perfect obedience, by his membership in the Godhead, and through his sacrifice. And so if you don't believe in that first part, our utter separation, our hopelessness, then what's the point in the reconciliation? Right? If you don't believe in our estrangement, then in the existence of the estrangement, in the existence of the person that we are estranged from, then obviously, what's the point in being reconciled to this non-person from the unbeliever's perspective? Skip that one. The present danger to our democracy isn't that Christianity has gained too much power and influence over our politics. Rather, it's the heresy of nationalism's co-option of Christian faith. It's that the heresy of nationalism's co-option of Christian faith has left the faith too weak to play the kind of positive role it has played in our public life. In our nation's better moments, Christianity has been intimately involved in American politics while standing somewhat apart from partisanship, summoning the country to reform without falling victim to the conceit that political reform is religion's only purpose. At their most robust and independent, our churches and religious leaders have reminded us that America is almost chosen, and that paradise isn't possible on earth. In our finer hours, orthodoxy's universalism has been potent enough to temper nationalism in both apocalyptic and messianic manifestations. But we do not inhabit such an hour today. Right here he just kind of gives a shout out to how in former decades the idea that like the culture, the Christian cultural hegemony that we used to have, however generic, however nominal, it was very useful. It kept us away from many extremes, the extremes of apocalyptic advances and the extreme of messianic advances, like the United States, we're not the Messiah, we're not the Savior of the world. Neither are we, neither are we to think the apocalypse is upon us, like the Cold War kind of induced that, and I would say many probably feel that way now, that the apocalypse is coming upon us. It very well may be, but it's gonna be the apocalypse of the Bible, not any like secularized apocalypse. The author Douthat, he mentioned earlier about liberal versus conservative, and I just wanted to take another moment to talk about. We often think about politics and especially social politics as liberals on the left, conservatives on the right, and it's interesting that libertarians they kind of straddle that fence between liberalism and conservative. I think that's kind of an interesting thing about libertarians. I won't go into that, but nevertheless, liberals, we have a thing in their mind as Christians, like liberals are just way too socially liberal, to a sinful extent. Conservatives, we want to preserve the moral foundations of Christianity, of the past, and how it used to be better in the past, and preserve that as much as possible. And while I, for the most, in a very general sense, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that, kind of generic assessment. But I like to think about liberality and conservatism in a broader sense. Like, I want to be conservative in the sense that I preserve what is good. And I want to be liberal in the sense that I bring about more of what is good. That's it. Now, you could also say I want to be conservative in the sense of I want to keep out what is bad. But I don't want to be liberal to the extent that I want to include what is bad. And so when it comes to politics, it's a question I often wrestle with, especially in our liberal democracy, where we do want to preserve peace. We want to preserve like practical, like secular peace, and we don't want Christians to be at war with non-Christians, like actual physical war in this country. We want to preserve peace. So there is a sense, and there is a sense, at least politically, where we have to allow people to believe other things, obviously, to practice sin without going to jail, right? But that doesn't mean that we ever want to get it to where it's illegal for us to speak out against that. Sadly, it's probably going in that direction. But with that broader frame of conservatism, oh my goodness, conservatism, is it conservatism or conservatism? Conservatism. I think it's conservatism, right? Conservatism. Conservatism. No, it's the second one. Conservatism. I think it's that one. I'll use them interchangeably. I don't know. All right. With that broader frame in mind, I want to kind of put that broader frame, how it might apply to the abortion issue. I wrote this probably whenever I read this book many years ago. It wearies me how pro-lifers are considered conservative while pro-choicers bask in the limelight of liberality. What's more dastardly conservative than supporting the execution of unborn babies for the sake of the short-sighted and ill-informed choice of the mother to do what she will with her body? Never mind that the baby is not her, but a separate body inside hers. And what's more liberal than welcoming all life, giving all people the right to be born with open arms, regardless of the missteps and selfish choices of those who'd sooner trash them than love them, right? So, pro-life proponents, they are the liberal ones. Pro-choicers, what a euphemism, of course that is. Pro-choicers, they are the conservative ones. That's what I would argue. Oh, yeah. This is great. This is a quote from Chesterton, GK, my favorite author. Douthat writes, "Time and again, Chesterton noted, the faith has to all appearance gone to the dogs, but each time it was the dog that died." And I think that this quote kind of harkens back to a quote we saw just a moment ago about how, sometimes it is in defeat, and it is in defeat that we are actually victorious, that we serve God in defeat and in being pushed down. Right? Throughout history, Christianity has been trampled upon and just seemingly snuffed out time and time again. But time and time again, God has brought it back from its darkest hour. And though it's gone to the dogs, it was the dog that died. I like that. Skip that one. Okay. Okay. First, such a faith should be political without being partisan. Do I want to do this one or not? Sorry, I'm not as prepared as I have been in the past. Okay, this one, yeah, this one's good. This one kind of wrestles with, as a Christian, how much should our Christianity enter our politics? Like, when does our Americanism end and our Christianity begin? To what degree do they overlap? I mean, it kind of goes back to that point. Like, I lean towards that there should be no separation. That you can't like my being a Christian is my fundamental identity. All my other sub identities, like being a husband, being an American, being a Hoosier, being an employee of such and such a place. These are all sub identities that are all are subservient to my one fundamental Christian identity. That being the case, let me read this. First, such a faith should be political without being partisan. This means avoiding the nationalist temptations described in the last chapter without falling prey to quietism and indifference. We need to be somewhat political. Now, but being political, I would say, doesn't mean going out and necessarily being what political means in most people's eyes. If you go out on the street corner and share the gospel, that's being political, in my book. There are many, many ways to be political without being quote unquote political. You can be political without necessarily engaging in politics, if that makes sense. Because anything we do that people hear is kind of political, because politics is the interactions of people and how people are ruled and governed and how that all interacts. I mean, that really, politics encompasses a lot of things, like almost every human activity it could. So the fact that there is no single model for a Christian politics, no uniquely godly leaders or nations or parties, doesn't absolve Christian citizens of the obligation to bring their faith to bear on debates about justice and the common good, right? Instead, it sharpens all Christians' obligation to be a model unto themselves, to make it clear in words and deeds how their faith informs their voting and their activism, and to constantly test their ideological convictions against their theological worldview. When believers practice politics, there should be a clear Christian difference, an allegiance to principle over party, that sets the Christian voter and the Christian politician apart from the typical Republican or Democrat. Yes, 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 yes. I believe with yes. I'm glad that I decided to read that. I would say that in I was involved in the college Republicans in college, and at the university, it was a Christian university, and there were some Christians there that they considered themselves Democrats, and honestly, I was like, what, huh? That created a lot of confusion in me, and it still did for many years, and honestly, to some degree, it still does to this day. But I would never in a million years say that just because you're a Democrat that you can't be a Christian, and just because you're a Christian that means you can't be a Democrat. That's too limiting. Now, for me, of course, the major issue with that is the abortion issue, and then increasingly the social issues of especially what marriage has been expanded to mean, and different things like that, and what nowadays what's a man, what's a woman, and the crazy ambiguity that is going on there. However, I think it's possible for people to be Democrats for reasons that don't subscribe to the normal Democratic view on those issues that I just said. Maybe you're Democrat for more like financial policies, economic policies, instead of the social issues. So that's one thing to be considered. Furthermore, I think that it's possible to be a Christian, to have the fundamentals down of what being a Christian is, to believe and hold the fundamental truths enough to where you're a believer, but yet somehow you haven't applied biblical principles to those social issues that I just said. And so maybe you're on the wrong side of those social issues, right? You don't see that homosexuality is a sin. You believe that men can become women and women can become men, and it's possible to be pan-gendered or non-binary, whatever. You believe all these things. You believe that abortion, to a large extent, is not a sin. I believe that it is possible. It's not probable, but it's possible to be a Christian and believe those things, because maybe you're a new Christian, or maybe you're a Christian that's grown up in a theological environment, in a church environment, to where they haven't appropriately applied the truth of the Bible to those issues, and you haven't been properly exposed to how they are truly applied. And I think it is possible to be a Christian, but to be gravely mistaken on those issues. So in that instance, it's once again, I think, possible to be a Democrat and still a believer, but to be hugely in error on those issues. And matter of fact, I've only ever voted Republican. I am a registered Republican, however, I more identify as an independent. I identify as an independent. I'm a registered Republican. I did so when I was 18. I still practically always lean towards Republicans for the social issues aspect, especially. There are, the economic policy too. I still believe they're mostly right on that, but that's not really the main. That's not really the main reason why I vote Republican. That being said, this past midterm election, I was actually on the campaign committee for a local Democratic candidate. He was a friend. Had he not been a friend, would I? Well, had he not been a friend, he probably wouldn't have even wanted me on his campaign committee to begin with. So, all that being said, yeah, I was on a campaign committee for a local Democratic candidate, but there was no contradiction there, because even though while the incumbent Republican candidate, there wasn't much at fault with him. I recognize that he sided with me on most of the issues, but I also recognize that I also agree with my friend on many other issues. My friend was what he identified as a blue dog Democrat. Most of the blue dog Democrats, they are Southern Democrats, and they hold socially conservative views, but they have economic policy and things like that, and other perhaps like fringe issues such as legalization or decriminalization of marijuana. They tend to be more liberal on that side, and as far as health care, they tend to be more liberal on that side. And I kind of went along with a lot of that, with a lot of what my friend and the Democratic candidate was his platform. So I was there. I never would, in a million years, would have thought I would be in that position. He did not win, but we made a valiant effort. So, and I would back him again. That being the case, am I greatly displeased with the Republican incumbent who was reelected? Not necessarily. I would have been fine, actually, with both of them winning from a very personal perspective, but I wanted my friend to have that chance to do his thing. All right. Just a couple more here. All right. Anyone who seeks a more perfect union should begin by seeking the perfection of their own soul. Anyone who would save their country should first look to save themselves. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Right? Don't take out the plank in your neighbor's eye, in your nation's Congress, in your nation's executive office, in your nation's judicial system, or don't remove the speck from there until you have removed the plank from your own eye. I think we can apply that to this as well. Right, Jordan Peterson has the 7 rules for living. I don't know all of them. I don't plan on reading that book. I think it would be a good book to read, but I plan on reading another book that he wrote. It just that one doesn't really appeal to me personally so much. I think it's good for a lot of guys, a lot of people. But anyways, I do know that one of those rules for living is clean your own room. The idea that you're not the person to clean up society unless you've cleaned up your own room first. Unless your own affairs are fairly in order, how can you expect to get the affairs of society right? So that also goes back to the plank and the speck verse, and also goes back to that verse here. Yeah, seek ye first the kingdom of God before you seek out anything else first. So that concludes us going through Bad Religion by Ross Douthat. I hope that you have enjoyed this. I hope it won't be 2 months before I put out another video, but it very well may be. It very well may be longer. I'm happy to get this out to you, and on my next video, I know I always reference G.K. Chesterton a lot, so I'm going to try to go over one of his books in my next video, or at least begin it. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope you are as well. And you shall, I was going to say we'll see each other, but you'll see me at another date. So, Peregrine Prude, out.